Welcome, everyone, to CSM Mastermind. Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our Success Coaching Training Program. We're back for our monthly live webcast today, diving into that sometimes challenging but ever so important relationship between customer success and sales. This learning opportunity is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training, with more than 27,000 students hailing from nearly 100 countries. Our skills development platform is making an impact across the globe. Now, this CSM Mastermind series is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic that is relevant to customer success. So no matter where you work, what your role is, or who your customers are, we've got you covered. And we handpick practical and useful topics that are designed just for people in customer-facing roles. So you can also check out our upcoming events at successcoaching.co. Our next and final mastermind session of 2023 will be December 13th, when we'll be talking about how to say no diplomatically, something I still struggle with my 14-year-old daughter, so I'm hoping to pick up a few tips. Click on the events tab at the top of the successcoaching.co page and find out more and register. It's also that time of year when we're planning our CSM Mastermind topics for next year, so let us know what CSM Mastermind topics you're interested in hearing about next year, or if you want to join us as a panelist. So Ashley has also dropped a link to our survey in the chat. Remember, we do these webinars for you and would appreciate your input. Now, there's a bunch of thought leadership out there, along with loads of theories on how to deliver customer success. But in this series, we're going to focus on practical real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those who are actually doing customer success day in and day out. And now to make that happen, we've invited three absolutely amazing panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are folks who are really damn good at what they do. And we're going to ask them to spill the beans on their experiences and perspectives. So without further ado, I want our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all and share a little bit about who they are and what they do. And let's get started, as usual, in alphabetical order, with somebody who probably doesn't need an introduction because she is so out there all the time. Kristi.
Thank you, Andrew. Thrilled to be back. I love this series. I'm really excited about today's conversation. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kristi Faltorusso. I am currently the Chief Customer Officer at Client Success. We are a customer success management solution. So we help our customers manage from what we say new to renew. I've been here for about 3 years and oversee our entire post-initial sales team, that is success, support, and services, as well as help our go-to-market and product strategy. Now, before that, I've spent the past 12 years building, scaling, and transforming customer success teams in B2B hypergrowth organizations. And so have a lot of experience doing a ton of things and a lot of stories that are applicable to today's conversation. Lastly, I will say thanks to Andrew and the team over at Success Coaching, I've actually had the privilege and fortune of being nominated and recognized as a 4-time top 25 customer success influencer from 2020 to 2023. And so love that program. If you guys are not following the folks on that list, I recommend you go check them out. So many fantastic leaders. And thank you, Andrew. Excited for today.
No, thank you, Kristi. Thanks for making time. Always great to see you. We were luckily fortunate to spend some time together back in September at the CS 100 hosted by Client Success. We don't get to see each other in person enough, but
not nearly enough. Agreed.
Not nearly, because we have a lot of fun. Kristi, besides knowing all this stuff about customer success, is just a really fun person to hang out with.
Oh, so, thanks, Andrew.
I appreciate you making time. Awesome, Kristi. Thank you. And then next up is Mandy.
Thank you, Andrew. Hi, everyone. My name is Mandy O'Brien, and I am currently the Vice President of Customer Success at PartnerEyes. So PartnerEyes is a global SaaS provider in the performance marketing space. What we do is a software platform and services that help some of the world's leading brands create operating leverage by turning their partnership channel into profit centers. A little bit about myself. So for the last 17 years, I've had the opportunity and privilege to operate as a customer success manager and leader, specifically in a professional services capacity, directly managing and scaling brands in the performance marketing arena. I've played many different roles along the customer journey, and my current role is to oversee our global service practice, really ensuring strategic alignment with our customer base, operational execution, and most importantly, serving as a brand advocate. Prior to entering the digital marketing industry, I started my early career in sales and marketing. That early experience, I have to say, I think truly allows me to understand the value each team plays throughout the customer lifecycle and how critical that collaboration is between sales and success. Putting the customer first is a shared value that I feel very, very strongly about, as well as everyone else here. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic today. Really quickly, would like to thank the panelists and Andrew for having me today. So Kristi and Nick, both experts, not only in their fields, but veterans, I found out, when it comes to the success coaching panel. So really excited to join them. And Andrew, this opportunity, I, along with my team, had the privilege of attending the success coaching level 1 and level 2 training and certification programs, which were honestly invaluable to the team. So I'm really looking forward to putting this knowledge to the test today.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you being a customer as well. And by the way, that was not a paid endorsement. So
not at all.
I do appreciate it, Mandy, and your perspective coming out of sales and marketing is going to be incredibly valuable to this conversation. And last but not least, Nick.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Gigliotti. I'm Director of Customer Success at Seek. Seek's a time series analytics platform for the process industry. So think chemical companies, oil and gas, pharmaceutical companies, etc. I wouldn't consider myself a veteran of this webinar, but that makes me feel really good about myself. It's my second time here. And I've been in CS for the last 5 years, first in sort of a professional services role, then as a CSM, and now as a leader. So lots of experience on this topic, having worked with the sales teams in a variety of roles. So happy to share my perspective. Grateful to be here. My background is actually in engineering. So I started as a chemical engineer and then transitioned to the world of software, where I ended up in customer success, and I'm super happy to be in this role. It's a great field. I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Thanks for the invite, Andrew and team.
I love that, Nick. I love talking about the different paths people take into customer success. And that now engineering, that's a new one, I think. We'll have Ashley send out a link to schedule some time for a one-on-one moment of truth conversation about that. I would love to talk about your path into success. But yeah, you're not the grizzled veteran like Kristi is. I mean, geez, Kristi, I think we have you on at least once a year, if not twice. We're in our 4th year.
I was going to say, I think multiple times a year.
Usually a couple times. Yeah. Well, you're a good draw. I mean, you got so many.
I know you use me for my following, Andrew. That's not lost on me.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, and what's not to like, right?
All right, let's get started, Andrew. This is going to be a fun topic. I think we're all excited to jump in. You're going to get us started or what?
So once again, we all appreciate your time today. So let's get to the topic at hand. So today we gather to explore a topic of utmost importance in the world of customer engagement, the dynamic relationship between customer success and sales. Now, this is traditionally seen as distinct functions, but their interaction is pivotal in crafting a customer journey that doesn't just start with a sale, but nurtures lasting loyalty and growth, right? It creates an experience that doesn't suck for the customer, right? It's a shared vision and an unwavering commitment to understanding the entire customer experience. And we stand at a pivotal moment where the seamless transition from sales to customer success is no longer a luxury, but a strategic imperative. It's something we talk about in our training. That handoff from sales to post-sales is so important that it's done well, it's done right, it's done smoothly. Some even argue that it's not just a handoff, it's a meaningful handshake, right? So how do we navigate this intersection adeptly, align our goals, and speak a unified language that fosters customer excellence? So today we're going to explore practical strategies to nurture this critical relationship, from implementing cohesive communication practices to celebrating customer achievements together, and we'll address some common challenges and debunk some misconceptions. So to kick off our conversation, let's all ponder this. In a market where customer loyalty is hard-earned, how can customer success and sales come together to transform every sale into a stepping stone for enduring relationships and recurring revenue?
So, Andrew, I mean, just to kick this off, we all know the client lifecycle begins with that first prospect email. And I think one of the most important ways to unite CS and sales, and not to oversimplify, is break down those silos at the initial stage of that client lifecycle. The more collaboration there is between these two groups up front, the more aligned both teams will be in setting expectations with the customers and really helping to navigate that client journey. I think we all know that churn can also take place due to an unsuccessful onboarding process. So these early interactions between sales, customer success, professional services, and the customer, if they're not done right, you're not going to be able to cement the foundation for a long-term relationship.
Manny, I think in your intro, you said it perfectly, and I totally agree. Everyone is responsible for sales and everyone is responsible for customer success. So silos are just unnecessary. And right before the sale gets done, I find it very helpful to bring in a CS leader or a CSM to talk the prospect and your future customer through what is the implementation of your product going to look like. That reduces the amount of risk involved in closing the deal. They know what the future holds for them post sale, and then it also starts to cultivate the relationship between customer success and the customer itself. So totally agree. Bringing customer success in pre-sales is super important, and one way we can break down the silos.
Nicholas, I think that that's a great point, but we also know that that can't be the reality for a lot of organizations, right? Like that is like a perfect alignment if you can do that, right? But we understand resourcing. You can't always afford to have those conversations, right? So I do think there is a lot of enablement and empowerment that has to happen with the sales team so that they can effectively have that conversation. I will tell you, as much as I would love and make myself available to be on every single prospect call that my team is bringing in, it doesn't always make sense, right? Sometimes it slows down the process. Sometimes, you have resource constraints. So it doesn't, I think, yes, do it when it makes sense, but also remember, not every product lifecycle price point makes sense to do that. But I will say, Andrew, I'm going to take your handshake and I'm going to up-level it. And I'm going to go as far as saying it's not a handshake anymore. It's a hug. You want to know why? Because sales does not have the volume and the velocity of sales coming in that they once did. And no longer are we seen as the stepchild. I will tell you, in my organization, we have put more emphasis on customer retention and success than ever before. And this is in a customer success platform company, right? Where we are already customer centric. We have up-leveled that even more so because of the dependency on retention and growth because of the slowed process, right? With sales. Now, I don't know if everyone is seeing that. I will tell you, at least all the conversations I'm having with our customers and others in the market, sales have not been great, right? So we cannot afford to buy churn. The collaboration needs to be strong. And I think sales is even more clear than they've ever been on the value and the importance of this collaboration. And so we're seeing less resistance. We're seeing more alignment on ICP. And I think we are starting to see more buy-in on the process and the value of those motions.
What's interesting is that this concept of it's cheaper to keep your customers than to go find new ones isn't new. It's been around for a century, right? Yet I see examples time and time again of companies that still don't get it, that management teams that still don't get it. I mean, look what happened during COVID. The early stages of COVID where pretty much everything stopped, right? And I remember our business, our sales completely stopped for what was it, Q2? When COVID hit right around March.
Yeah, March 2020.
Our sales effectively stopped in Q2. From April, May, June, we had nothing. And we were freaking out. We're a small business. We bootstrapped this thing. It was all about cash flow to us. And what we started seeing and hearing about were these leaders in these companies that they were doubling down on salespeople and laying off customer success folks. And I'm like, that's completely ass backwards. Right? And so there's this. I've always been about customer value, even back in the on-prem days where we captured 80% of their budget, before we even rolled the thing out. Right? So that has always been my mindset. But in the subscription economy where we're only getting a small piece up front, not to diminish anything that sales does because they have a tough job. it's all about customer success. It's all about value creation. We're playing a long game here, right? We have to, the unit economics require us to increase customer lifetime value as much as possible. And while that begins in the sales process, it's all about post-sales that makes that happen.
It's Yogi Berra saying, I think he said it, at least that's what one of our sales leaders at Seek says, deja vu all over again, right?
Yeah.
We see it happen all the time. But yeah, the focus on the post-sales relationship with our customers definitely, as everything is sort of slowed down a little bit, is definitely being emphasized much stronger. But in terms of practical, ways that sales and CS can collaborate better, one, I agree with you, Kristi. We're not going to be able to be involved in every pre-sales deal, but if you're implementing processes on the pre-sales side and you can't bring the customer success team in, I think one thing that you need to have documented is the why behind the buy, right? That's, as we're coming to renewals, we sort of circle back on that idea all the time, right? You need to know why the customer bought your product, what were the outcomes they were trying to achieve, and continuously following up with them post-sale on whether we're achieving those outcomes is super important. So make sure you've got that documented before the customer buys the product, even if you can't involve CS before the deal is signed.
Nick, I think, I had a similar thought as well. Kristi, to your point, it's physically impossible, right, for everyone to be able to collaborate as early as possible in the process. I completely agree with that. I think in terms of sharing that information is power. We all know that. I think one tool also that is extremely impactful and beneficial is having a single source of truth document, right? So not only documenting that, but making sure it is in a centralized location that is easily accessible and digestible for not only sales, customer success, and any other function that is going to support this client. I think about it, how can a prospect's experience as they transition from becoming a prospect to a customer be seamless if all the teams supporting that transition aren't fully abridged of the motivations that really drove that decision to become a customer in the first place? They really can't, right? Unless everyone's informed and operating from that one single source of information.
I think we need to do a better job of systemizing these things. I don't know about you guys, but a doc is wonderful. And listen, I'm always like, if it's free, it's for me. So I love to use things that don't cost me more money. But let's be honest, everyone has a CRM. Many, not all, definitely not all, have a CSP. You've got these tools and systems, but yet we still encourage and almost mandate folks to re-document everything and redo these things. In an organization where we're trying to drive more efficiency, we've got less people, right? How many companies have done RIFs? We still don't rely heavily enough on the systems that we've got in place to reduce duplicative effort. So I would just put a mandate out there that if you've got someone managing your CRM, let's just create really easy fields for your sales team to capture these things so that they don't have to go and rewrite all of this into a doc. And let's simplify these processes, because I think when you introduce these points of friction, like we slow down the sales velocity when you ask them, like, okay, great, you close this deal. Now go spend 2 hours recapturing everything. Now I'm with you, Mandy. Source of truth, 100,000%. We need to all be aligned on all that information. Let's just make it easier for folks, right? It doesn't need to be as complex and as heavy as I feel like our processes make it.
Make it a gate. Make it a gate before you can move that deal to close one.
That's
the why behind.
I mean, and that's the thing. It's so easy to do that.
You have to put it in there. Like that's the simple solution, right? And then make that information easily accessible to the CSM who picks it up after they transition it.
Yeah. So long before the CSPs, back in the early days of customer success, when I was at Intact and built one of the first customer success teams outside of Salesforce, one of the things that we mandated the sales team, and we did exactly that, Nicholas, we gave them 12 questions that needed to be answered in order for them to move that deal to close one. And so we tried with the carrot at first, and then we moved to the stick. And of those 12 questions, I think there were there were maybe 2 or 3 of them that were kind of free form text. Everything else was select something right here. We made it super, super dumb easy for them, for the sales team to fill this information out. And one of those questions was, why for the buy? Right? So why are you buying this? Now, in our case, for 95% of the customers, we needed to do some scoping of a professional services effort that was associated with that to configure their system and set up their books. It was an accounting package. And so the motivation behind this was so that we could get sales to provide the people who were scoping this information out with enough information that they could limit their scoping call to under an hour once. Because a big complaint that I was getting from sales was it takes too much time to scope this out, and we have to have too many calls. And I'm like, okay, let's figure this thing out. Let's put a process in place. But this is what I need you to do, and this is what my team will do. But putting in those filters, those gates, are a great way of motivating your sales team, who is coin operated, and doesn't get paid until that deal gets set to close one, to do the stuff you need to get done in order to better understand your customer.
The having a hard gate helps, but I think one other thing that could sort of reduce this friction, like separate the sand and the Vaseline that sometimes happens between sales and CS, is
CSMs. Good job, man.
CSMs and post sales teams. I think just like we invest so much time into building relationships with our customers, we also need to dedicate time to building relationships with the sales people, the sales side of the organization, right? We need to sort of sell them sometimes on what's the value of keeping CS informed. How is this going to help your customer that you've just brought into the fold stay a customer for life, right? That might be a blind spot, right? We're so focused on our day-to-day jobs, but building a relationship with the sales side of the business is super important, I think.
I mean, on that topic, and I know this is something that we had spoken about during some of our initial prep conversations, but the relationship between the two groups is so symbiotic, right? So the inherent nature of sales and success should be mutually beneficial, but not only to each other, I think also to the customer. So if you think about that relationship, and Andrew, I think I had shared this with you, sales needs customer success for that expert knowledge, context, and some use cases, right? From customer success to be able to appropriately position some of the capabilities at times. Whereas the success team, we need sales to drive net new client growth in order to continue to build out our portfolios. We also need to work closely with the sales team to make sure that proper expectation setting is done up front, and that helps us deliver that seamless, if not exceptional customer experience. So I think, Nick, you're right. It's spot on. We need one another, and we have to make sure that we collaborate to make sure both of us are successful in our own right.
Right. One of the things we're trying to improve that symbiotic relationship is some sort of, we're calling it a pods concept, right? Where the same CS post-sales support team is working with the same sales execs on all of the deals they come in. I'm thinking about what you said, Kristi. Hard to scale sometimes, but these experiments are, I think, what drive continuous improvement, right? Our thought is, if we have the same group of people working together all the time, you limit context switching, you build up, you understand how your different team members work together, and it also ultimately be more efficient and a better experience for the customer too.
I love the pod concept. I helped a company early on when we were doing a lot of consulting. I helped a company implement the pod concept, and it was incredibly successful for them. Did you, with your pod concept, have you adjusted the compensation as well?
We haven't gotten that far yet. Interesting idea. But no, right now we're just sort of integrating the teams together, not touching anything on the incentive side, but that's a very interesting idea. be
So
interesting.
Andrew, when I did that, we did that for our enterprise and global teams. And we did do that, right? There was each pod that we built, and we only did this for our top tier customers because it didn't scale as we moved down market. SMB model, it didn't work that way.
No,
We had too many salespeople, right? It was very transactional. It didn't require that motion anyway. Only in our enterprise and strategic and global accounts did we actually need that infrastructure. But one of the things that worked really well is that we all had the same objectives. I think a lot of the friction that we see today between sales and CS is that we have competing objectives. We are not incentivized to do the same things. We're pitted against each other almost by design and intentionally by organizations. So I think if we're going to try to remove that friction, there has to be more alignment around these KPIs.
100%. That's the thing. We incentive drive behavior, right? So
because people will do what you pay them to do, shockingly.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you can't get it's and I used to get pissed at sales all the time until I, grew up a little bit and realized that, hey, you know what? They're just doing what they've been paid to do, right? They're paid to go hunt, right? And unless we incent them in a different way. And what we did is we created a sliding scale for the sales and the success folks. And so they would own that book of business in this pod structure, and sales would continue to earn on that customer. But over time, that scale would reduce, and the scale would increase for customer success. But everybody was motivated to identify the right customers, bring them in and grow them, drive adoption, right, and continue to deliver value. So sales was incented to ensure we're bringing in the right customers, asking the right questions, getting the right information out of customer success, and then providing the right information to customer success so that as we went through the onboarding and adoption and customer growth process, customer success was in lockstep with what the customer's expectations were. Everybody was kind of rowing in the same direction.
Right.
Andrew, I don't know if you guys, Mandy or Nicholas, I don't know if you guys hear this often, but there is often a conversation around, well, great, do we incentivize sales on retention, right? So if they close the deal, does that deal stay? Now, we've not been successful in executing that. I think that there's too many variables there, but what we have done is actually try to structure sales comp, part of it tied to successful onboarding, right? In order to do that, right, you probably need the right ICP, right goals identified, right handoff, all of these processes. And so at least it gets you beyond that greatest risk point that there's a failure to launch. And if sales is incentivized against that early stage motion, there's likely going to be stronger alignment. So going back to again, people will do what you pay them to do. So that's something that we've considered. I've done it successfully at 2 other organizations, but just curious, Mandy, Nicholas, if you guys are doing similar things like that in your own businesses.
We're not doing that right now. I love that idea, though. I think, all 3 of us have said it in one way or another, right? That handoff is the most important part, and where there could be the most friction. But that's a really interesting concept. The thing that I always run into trouble with is like, how do you measure onboarding? Depends on your product, yada, yada, yada. But I really like that idea, Kristi.
And it doesn't have to be their entire quota, right? Like they get paid most, maybe it's like 80-20, right? Like 80% they get on the close and 20% is tied to it. But if they're hitting their numbers and they're doing well, right, that 20 could be meaningful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
We'd hold back 40%.
We'd
hold back 40%
I love you, Andrew. You do that.
Until you've reached that first point of value.
Right.
One of the blind spots that I feel like I've been encountering lately, we always talk about, or in CS, of course, we talk about sort of the processes and the risks when we have a CSM transition on a customer account, right? One of the things that I hadn't really thought about is the risks and the sort of anxiety that it can put on a CSM when the AM or the sales exec who's working with you also transitions to another account. The salesperson sometimes has these higher level, buyer or executive sponsor relationships that the CSM may not have. They might have that, tribal knowledge about the why behind they bought. So one thing that we're thinking about putting some process in or sort of elevating to work on more is our internal CS process when a salesperson transitions off an account. It can put a lot of anxiety on your CSMs, right? All of a sudden, sometimes they're now responsible for sort of educating the new salesperson on what's going on at the account, who are the stakeholders, and it could draw the CSM into some of the commercial aspects of the account, which put that idea of the CSM as the trusted advisor at risk. So wondering, Mandy, Kristi, have you all, do you have processes in place on the CS side managing sales transitions?
I mean, in my experience, I would say, trying to rely on some of the processes that we've already established, specifically around that centralized location, the use of the CRM, the source of truth, to really make sure all the information is housed, so we don't have to almost start over. But I would say I don't have a specific process for a sales transition. Because do you mean mid prospect?
I mean, post sales. So if sales is responsible for expansions or
okay, so that's if you have sales teams that are still involved post initial sale. Okay, so I mean that's a very specific model, right? So a lot of organizations, you've got a net new logo sales team. So it's like, I don't care what happens to my sales team after the deal is done, because my organization is the one building and facilitating those relationships. And I would say, regardless of even if you have sales still involved, the CSM should actually be elevating themselves in the relationship. Like I always say, nobody owns the customer. The company owns the customer. So it's not the AM, it's not the CSM. As a company, you need to be multi-threaded into the business. I meet with every single one of my customers. I spend over 40% of my week, every single week, on calls with customers proactively, not in an escalated state. And I think it's really important to call that out. This is not late stage customers at risk, Kristi, get on a call. This is me proactively engaging on strategy, alignment, focus, value, and that is part of our motion. So I don't know that I've ever built an infrastructure that is dependent on any one person. I can't have a key man risk, right? So I think I've always built infrastructure that would prevent that from ever being a thing.
Yeah, Kristi, I think you make such a good point that I'd like to just spend a minute on. It's not one person's responsibility. So in addition to sales, continuing that relationship with the customer, it's customer success. In my world, it's professional services, it's key account managers who are also assigned. So really taking that collaborative effort. And Kristi, I think you also make a great point that getting that client interaction prior to it being a necessity for
that's the biggest thing. That's the game changer, right? Why do we get pulled in after everything's on fire, the house is burning down, they've already told you they're going to churn? Like that's the worst time to get involved. So I think you got to design an infrastructure that enables the proactive engagement at the right levels, but diversifying it, right? Nobody should own any specific relationship. I know, our CEO, Dave Blake, he's equally as involved in our customers as I am, as all of our team. So I think focusing on that as a diversified strategy probably makes more sense, Nicholas, to combat that risk and break down those silos. Also elevates your CSMs.
Yeah, I would also say, Nick, too, mapping different individuals in your organization to different contacts on the client end, always trying to get more contacts, right? You never just want, I would say, your main point of contact. There should always be more touch points, I would say, within the organization. That's something that we definitely strive to do. From, Kristi, to your point, executive sponsors at the client level, and then just mapping that, whether it's executive sponsors and sales, customer success, key accounts, as well as professional services.
Yeah, I think you really need to approach informing and that handover from the get-go like it's a customer dossier, right? I'm going to convey to you and everybody else, I'm going to document all of those things. I'm going to document the why behind the purchase, the personality of the people we're dealing with. I mean, we talk about tribal knowledge, that this individual has about what's going on in the customer organization. Well, they're responsible for communicating that information, because especially in sales, their job is to go, hunt, capture, and move on, right? That's the nature of sales, right? And even if they are still attached to that customer for some renewal discussion or expansion discussion, that's typically, 9 months out, 12 months out from the last time that they spoke to. So they should be communicating all of that information as part of the handover, as part of that process. And so we're huge fans of the customer dossier, right? And whether you create that in your CRM system and then transfer it to your CSP if you have that, or some other role, it is one person's responsibility as far as, you gotta at least communicate what's going on. Okay, you got to communicate what you know, and not require people to come hunt you down and say, okay, what do you know? And in order to do that, the post-sales team needs to kind of lay out, okay, here's what we need to know. Here's what we want to know, right? You can't expect them to know what you want.
We've said it. I think all of us have said it a bunch of times. This trend, the handoff, the hug. I love the hug. Super important. Another thing I've learned.
Getting more touchy.
Yeah. Another thing I've learned working with salespeople, you may have to tell someone, 3 times to get it to stick. I find with salespeople, you have to tell them 7 times, and you have to tell them in multiple forms. So whenever you're trying to influence them or change a process, tell them many, many times. Sure, we'll learn that in the change management course coming up in December.
Yeah, you need to. And that's it. It's a great call out. Thank you. You're asking people who have an existing process that they follow, and they have a lot of these sales teams have pretty well developed frameworks for doing sales, whether it's BManter or it's Medic or what have you. You've got to really spell out for them what your expectations are. Then you need to create a presentation that you can speak to that explains it. Then you typically need to kind of restate it over and over and over again, and then document it. And you're still going to have people that are doing things the wrong way, right? So if it's something that you need from a post-sales motion, you need to be the one that initiates that initiates that communication, that educates, right? They're not doing it 99 times out of 100. They're not doing anything maliciously, right? They're doing things in that because they don't know any better, and they haven't been trained. They haven't been educated on the why it's wrong, and also to your point, Nick, on change management, what's in it for them, right? And it's so important to be positioning these processes and these requests for information. Because it's not just good for the customer, not just good for you, but it's good for them as well. So we've got a dozen questions in Q&A. We're getting up to almost quarter till the hour. Just a reminder, we go until quarter past the hour, so we'll answer as many questions as we can. So let's get to some questions, and I'll ask my panelists to take a look at the list of questions. If you see anything that jumps out at you as being something you want to jump in on right out of the gate, go ahead. I see Nick, you already did. So let's start with, we got a lot of anonymous attendees again. Apparently this is such a divisive subject that people don't want to attach their names to the questions. So our first question, what advice do you have for CS and sales leaders who have told and encouraged their teams to partner in sales reps, for the most part, is not following suit? Okay, Nick, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, sure. I just said one aspect of it, which is say it 7 times. Maybe you have to say it 10 times. Just say it over and over again and get it to stick. That's, I think, something that's super important. And I would say if you're a CS leader, you need to build a strong relationship with your sales leaders so that you can influence them and help escalate if you feel like there are individuals on their teams who aren't rowing in the same direction, right? I think we've talked about it. This handoff, the hug, is super important, and we need to make sure that it's executed. And that starts with getting leadership buy-in and repeating it over and over again.
Can I add here? There's 2 things that have worked really well in the organizations that I've been a part of. One is instructing people to assume good intentions. I think too often we make the assumption that people don't want to do something or they don't care enough, right? We have this assumption that people are maliciously doing something against the grain, against the infrastructure. So the way that I've been successful is going into every interaction assuming good intentions, right? There is probably some very specific or good reason why we did this. The second part to this is seeking to understand. So yes, I could go tell my 15-year-old daughter to do something over and over and over. And probably like Andrew's, she does not listen always, but I seek to understand, right? So I go into conversations with her, asking good questions about why this isn't working or why aren't you doing and really dive in there, because I think the more I understand about their processes and their infrastructure, it helps to foster that collaborative kind of motion between those two teams. So I will tell you all day till I'm blue in the face, I could have the best alignment with every sales leader out there, and we could be totally simpatico and on the same page with everything. As that starts to go down, right, that breaks some places. And you've got to encourage your team to do those two things. Assume good intentions and seek to understand. That way they can collaborate as opposed to telling people. Because I'll tell you something, I don't like to be told what to do. Andrew knows that. So we have to also probably guess that other people do not like to be told what to do either. If you approach it as a seek to understand, you're likely going to have a very productive conversation as opposed to this like, we're supposed to do this and you're not doing this, so go do this.
I would never tell you what to do. I'm too terrified.
Because you know better. And I love that about you.
Mandy, you got anything to add?
No, I mean, I think they pretty much covered it. But I was about to just take another question, if that's okay.
Well, let me. I just want to finalize this. Also, anonymous attendee. So all great points. Also, systems. We talked about it. Use gates, right? That's a great way. It's unfortunately it's the carrot versus the stick. So you can use the carrot, or you can if that doesn't work, use the stick. So putting gates into systems, that's a great way to mandate certain things get done. And we've already touched on it, incentives, right? Incentives drive behavior. So, you might want to consider figuring out, is there some way that we can incent this partnership behavior that who knows what, maybe that's holding back commissions from salespeople until the customer receives value, if it's a time to value issue or what have you. Awesome. Thank you, anonymous attendee. Nick, can you hit the done button, and we'll move on to the next question here. Awesome. We got one down and 11 left. Another anonymous attendee asks, we struggle with the customer being confused about who they should be contacting because sales will not get out of the way after sales. How does CS and sales collaborate after the sale that doesn't confuse the customer of who's in charge? Oh, Kristi wants to jump in on this one. So,
are you surprised?
I'm sure. No, I'm not.
Okay, very good. I'm glad that we're on the same page here. So, I guess my first question would be, if this is more like Nick, what you described with your model, right, where sales is required to stay involved, right? I think if there's something you have to just structure around that if sales is part of this pod or infrastructure in the ongoing partnership. But if sales is just being messy post-sales, where they should really kind of be ripping off that Band-Aid after the partnership kickoff, I think that there's two different motions and you've got to solve two different problems. So I'm going to use the one that I'm most familiar with, the infrastructure that I build out, which is net new sales closes the deal. And then after that, we kind of let them go do what they do best, which is sell more new business. If the case is that the salesperson is still involved, right, and it is confusing our customer, we try to make sure that in our partnership kickoff, which is the initial meeting we have post-sales, we do not go straight into onboarding ever. We align with a partnership kickoff, which is an executive level conversation, and we require executives to be present. We do a really good job, I think, and our customers have said so, that we are very clear on the roles and responsibilities of each member of our organization and who to go to for what. And we try to make sure that we continue to drive that home by how we respond, how we engage, right? So if you've got salespeople who stay engaged and they stay involved and they're responding to things that the CSM should be, or doing things like that, that's where things get confusing. So you've got to have clear swim lanes that you can communicate back to your customer, but then you have to be living those every day, right? So to your point, like tell people 7 times, your customers have to see that, right? If they're sending support tickets to your CSMs and your CSMs are answering those tickets, guess what? Your customer's not going to stop sending them support tickets. So you have to train the right behaviors. I'm a big advocate of just being very clear about who to go to for what those swim lanes are, and then hoping internally we can start to just master that. If you've got a salesperson who's just being particularly bad, assume good intentions and seek to understand.
Swim lanes, rules of engagement, whatever it is, you got to document this stuff and make sure everybody's on the same page, and then make sure that you're in agreement about those things and communicate that to the customer. Here's where you go.
I would say one other thing, we have a very similar process with a proper kickoff call where we outline the roles and responsibilities. So the RACI is so critical. So they know exactly who to go to for what, through different phases of the life cycle. And again, not to oversimplify, but if you see, and I have done this, if I see that clients are going back to the sales team to ask certain questions, I'll just you have to insert yourself too, right? Have that conversation, have an open and honest conversation, dialogue with the team and say, let me take over. Let me take care of that. It'll free up your time, right? It's better for the sales team if you start to jump in and then you start to build that rapport and more collaboration directly with the client. So again, simple answer, but don't be afraid to, I would say, inject yourself there and then just have that conversation internally.
Awesome. Nick, anything to add?
No, I like the one-liners I'm learning here, injecting yourself and assuming good intentions. But yeah, transparent and open and direct, conversation, transparency and honesty is better than telling, encourage your CSM to just talk to that person and sort of sell them on why they're the professional post-sales implementation and let me handle it.
Awesome. Thank you for the question. Kristi, if you could hit done for me, please. Next question comes, yes, yet another anonymous attendee. Some companies count churn against the CSMs, but don't look into the big picture of the sales rep signing this not ideal customer on. It seems like this would be fair if the CSM was part of the pre-sales and held more incentive for renewals. Is this a realistic thought? Yeah, I don't know. I think that at the end of the day, like you said, Kristi, it's not realistic for customer success to be involved. I think what's probably going to be more effective is doing some churn analysis and figuring out what was the root cause of this. And yes, I don't think it's fair that customer success gets dinged when a customer churns, but hey, maybe marketing set the wrong expectation. Maybe sales set the inappropriate set wrong expectations, made inappropriate promises. Maybe product didn't follow through on some features that were promised, or the product can't do what was advertised to do. I mean, there's so many different angles, and I think it's important that you assess that. I mean, you're always going to have outliers, but I mean, if you consistently get churn based off of, hey, you know what, sales set inappropriate expectations, then I wouldn't be looking at customer success, the treatment of customer success as much as, hey, what do we need to do to fix this, right?
Well, I'll tell you two things that we do that have been super helpful. We've got ways to track all of that. So the minute a customer comes into the partnership, we are tracking day one if there are flags like that. And then we have an attribution to revenue that we are tracking and reporting back to our sales leadership. And we don't wait until they churn, right? We are talking about it early and often, even as much so as going down to each of the individual AEs, right? So if you've got some folks who are just notoriously selling to whomever will buy, right? So you're effectively just buying churn. We like to report back on that so the sales leaders can also do some coaching. We also work to make sure that our team is also sharing back different revisions and things that should be considered for the ICP, right? One of the things that I created was a success probability score, and that is entirely based on factors and considerations that have nothing to do with our ICP, but behavioral things about the organization, the leader. So like even the individuals who have purchased our software that might put this customer at risk very early. So tracking all of those things, having a very clear attribution to revenue and then business impact, and then making sure that that data is being shared internally early and often have been really key to at least having the right conversations.
I love that. So like if the key stakeholder doesn't show up for the kickoff call,
flag,
that probably drops their it's a big flag.
It's like
right?
yellow card. I'm sorry, I'm going to speak in soccer for us, Andrew.
Yeah, it's total yellow card. It could be a red card, depending on how big.
Yeah. Red cards are the best cards.
Yeah. Emma gets ice cream when she gets a clean.
I know
yellow
that's
card
why.
pitch. Yeah. So, Mandy, Nick, what do you got to add? Anything?
So I think that the feedback loop is extremely important, right? So if you're seeing consistent feedback, right, around churn and that churn analysis, it may be that a refinement needs to be made to the ICP, right? You had mentioned like not signing a right fit customer. I think that even if you take 10 steps back, the alignment on the ICP, not only the alignment on the ICP, but also the KPIs and objectives for acquiring and retaining those new customers is just extremely critical.
Manny, but you hit it, right? Like customer success leaders need to be in the room when the ICP is being designed and defined. And guess what? When it's locked down, it's not permanent. It changes. Just like the market, our persona, the product, it needs to evolve. And it needs to evolve with our voice. And I will tell you more often than not, customer success is not in the room. It's marketing, it's sales, it's the executive leadership team, it's finance, it's whomever else. But for some reason, our voice is not heard when that is being designed and defined. And all the data that we house is the data that actually should be used to determine what the ICP is.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so instead of feeling sorry for your CSM team or looking for ways to make them part of the pre-sales process, I would focus your energy on going back to, okay, what's the root cause of this happening? If it's something that's happening frequently enough that is causing some concern, I think you got to go back to the root cause of it.
Yeah, going back to this CS being involved in pre-sales, I don't think it's effective for every deal. I don't even think it's really effective for bring like an individual CSM in to help close a deal. I think it's an effective strategy for like enterprise customers. Do it with a CS leader, someone who can speak extremely fluently about the customer journey. I think it's most important and most effective in those enterprise global customer kind of situations.
I think it's a must-have in enterprise customers, but I actually would disagree with you as far as bringing the leader in. I mean, maybe depending on the size of the deal, you might want to have the leader might want to show up. But if I'm an enterprise key stakeholder, I would appreciate having my enterprise customer success manager as part of those closing kind of those final pieces of the puzzle as we're going through the closing process of the deal, because that reassures me as that key stakeholder, okay, that there were all these promises that were made by the people who make promises, and now I've got the attention of somebody who's going to be responsible for turning those promises into reality, and they're there before we close the deal. So it
also helps with sales velocity. Can we talk about that in some of these big deals where we know the deals, especially you get to the end, that final 10 yards, that takes forever for a big enterprise company. You're stuck in legal procurement. How amazing is it if you can start the process, right? Start the intake, do some kickoffs, facilitate those conversations. Sometimes the sales team is looking for other opportunities to have engagement with the prospect and not let the deal slip. So these are organic ways that you can bring it in where it actually makes sense and adds value. And I think in some cases at that level, it can scale, right? I just wouldn't bring them into everybody.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's been very impactful for us in the organization. So a couple things. So I would say bringing success early in the discovery, right? Just to understand the pain points, the goals, the aspirations. Well, that's traditionally part of the sales discovery process. I think if customer success, if it's feasible to be looped in at that stage, it's much more helpful, I would say. Also from a strategic perspective, many times these customers not only want to hear from people within the role, within success or professional services, but they want to meet the team. They want to meet the team. It gives them that level of comfort, Andrew, as you had mentioned. And finally, like in our world of a SaaS-based business, integrating the client during onboarding can many times be burdensome. I think we all know that. So prevent that. We've actually shifted some of the technical requirement gathering and onboarding into the final stages of the sales process, which also helps ensure a smooth handover and transition, mainly for the client. So just something.
This is our whole outbound or outcome-based selling model, where we get customer success or anybody in the post-sales world involved in the latter stages. It's something that we're 100% aligned on. But yeah, so this next question, though, from yet another anonymous attendee is, and I've actually not been able to say thank you to any specific person yet. We've had nothing but anonymous questions. But this kind of dovetails on what we were just talking about. And it looks like, Nick, that you wanted to jump in on this. I don't know how much more we really need to, how much more we can expand on this, but this question, this attendee asks, well, while I do wholeheartedly agree that break down silos from the start is critical to pushback I've heard on this usually revolves around not wanting to use CSMs to help close the sale because they're not sales and they aren't commission based. Actually, that's actually been, at least in my experience, it's actually been helpful in closing the deal, right? Because they're not commission based, right? So what is your response to the idea that CSM should stay out of the sales process because they could be used by sales to seal the deal and get them a commission? I always look at that as being it's actually being incredibly powerful.
I think I think used is kind of a negative connotation to bringing it in, right? Like we need to do, even though CS is a post-sales org, like we live and die by new business, right? We need to bring in new business. So I would think of it as like an additive, right? Reducing friction, I think it reduces risk because the customer knows what they're going to get. And I think like Mandy and Kristi said, building relationships between your team and the customers before they buy is really important.
Andrew, can I add something to this? Because Nicholas, I think you're spot on. And I think that there is a lot of value in this, but not only from a business standpoint. Can we talk about the employee experience for a moment here? I was a CSM before I was a leader. And I like to think that I was pretty good at my job, which inevitably got me to where I am today. Great. Maybe I was successful. But I loved being pulled into the sales process because one, it demonstrated that I was an expert. It helped me, it validated me from my sales counterparts. Every part of it, it really made me feel good as an employee. So I think that there's all these benefits, right? But we often forget about the people behind all these processes. And if you can help set somebody up on your team to be successful, and sometimes these types of things are things that people need. I'm a words of affirmation girl. I need head pats. I need somebody to tell me I'm doing a great job. When sales says, I need Kristi on this call to close this enterprise deal, that is like feeding my soul. So I think that there's a lot of benefits to this that even go beyond all the processes, our customers, but I think we should be thinking about our people too. And I think this is a good way to earn some goodwill and collaboration with your CS and sales individual contributors.
I love it. I think that's totally spot on.
Andrew's going to say something nasty about me, though.
No, I'm not. I was just going to say, Kristi, I think you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job today.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for my head pat.
When you get that just it's a much faster feedback loop. I think a lot of the times, like you get that immediate feeling of like your contribution was valued, rather than sometimes it's when you are working towards a once a year renewal. You kind of get down in the doldrums sometimes, like mid-July when you're working towards a January renewal, right? But I think I love that. I love that idea, Kristi. Totally right.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think it helps really stretch the skill sets of your team too, right? So not only validation for people that typically do it, but how do you find the next rising star? How do you continue to grow and develop your staff, right? And get them exposed to other people within the organization, as well as other clients, right? I think it's a win-win for everybody, right? It's great for the customers, but it's also good for the internal team. So I think that's
snaps all around.
All right. Thank you for that question. Our next question from anonymous attendee asks, what questions should sales be asking to make the transition as smooth as possible for the CS team? It looks like, Mandy, you want to jump in on this.
Yeah, so I read this as the questions that sales should be asking the customer to obtain as much information as possible to seamlessly hand it over to the CS.
That's how I interpret this as well. So let's go with that.
There's two things that stand out to me that they're the first two questions that I always ask. Number one, which is obvious, what are the goals and objectives? that they are trying to achieve. But equally as important, what are the current problems that they have and the pain points that I, as a CS, manager, as well as professional service team member, what problems am I going to solve? So those are just at the forefront. Obviously, you're going to go through all of the discovery information in terms of major KPIs, what is the revenue targets, budget goals, but those are the two things that just stand out to me. They're the first things that I ask. I don't know, Nick and Kristi. I would say probably the problems almost trump, because I want to solve the problem at hand first.
The why behind you buy, basically what you said, the desired outcomes you want to achieve.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing. I think the people involved on the customer side is really important for the CSM to know too. Who's the buyer, who's going to be the champion, etc. But number one thing, why did they buy?
I think it's part of those, but I'm just going to take a different spin on this. What are their expectations for the partnership? Because I've had a lot of people be very clear in articulating their goals and their objectives or their pain points. But there is something different about that and what their expectations are. Because what I end up hearing the expectations is how we partner together, how the technology solves their problems, right? Like, so it actually, I feel like it tells me more about what we need to deliver as an organization to partner with them effectively. And it goes beyond just the software or the services that we're providing. So their expectations, that's just another question I would say has been really helpful for me to understand, because it allows us to hone in and maybe make things feel a bit more personalized to them based off of their answer.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Mandy.
I was just going to say that then allows you to really outline your engagement and your ways of working, right? And then you go through your playbook and the expectations of not only the customer, but what expectations we have of customers too. There's a level of expectation
Which is a great point.
You need, right, in order to have a successful, meaningful partnership.
So 100% agree with you on the expectations, because, without clearly understanding the expectations, we are going to be missing each other. Right, we're going to be missing, and if we don't, if there are misset expectations, because that never happens in sales. If there are misset expectations, we need to confront those right out of the gate, right? Because otherwise, we will risk disengagement, which makes the entire onboarding and adoption process fundamentally impossible. Especially if that disengagement is occurring at the key stakeholder level. So 100% agree with you, Kristi, on that. What's interesting about what Mandy and Nick, you both said, you got the why, right? The problem, pain points, or opportunities, right? And then I like, Nick, that you added the stakeholders. And the reason why you look at those three things, what do those three things lead you to ultimately, which can be an incredibly powerful understanding for a customer success team. They lead you to the connection between what you're doing and how it links to corporate objectives. What are the things that we're doing at a tactical level and solving this problem for this person? Well, how can we connect those dots between what we're doing to some overarching company objective, right? Which makes our product sticky. Because when we're successful and we're adding value, we're not just adding value because we improved the collections process, right, for the accounting team, but we actually allowed through lower DSO the CFO to be able to borrow money at a lower interest rate because cash flow is up, right? So being able to connect those dots between the value that you're creating and how it affects the operations of the company makes you so much more sticky as a vendor. And it's understanding those connections and building the relationships with the people who care about those things mitigates the risk of churn, increases the opportunity for expansion and renewal. And even if that customer of yours gets acquired by a bigger company, you can still mitigate the risk of a churn if you have demonstrated the value that you're bringing to that organization and the powers that be that are being acquired are able to communicate that value. Hey, one of the reasons you bought us is because of X, Y, and Z. Well, part of that has to do with this vendor that helped us do this thing much more efficiently or capitalize on these opportunities. So I used to think that and the acquisition of the customer would be a valid churn. I no longer think that anymore. I think the only valid churn is that the company's gone out of business. But that's just based off that back and forth. That's what I got out of that. I don't know if you all agree with me. You think I'm full of shit. So you're more than welcome to throw your 2 cents in. I'm sure Kristi's about to.
I am not. I'm looking at the clock and saying we probably have time for one more question.
We do have time for one more question. Mandy, can you hit the done button? Thank you.
You got it.
Okay, so wow. And this last question will round out all the anonymous questions. I work in an organization that has loads of redundancy between what they call account management and CS. We get in one another's way all day, every day. Part of this is really a cultural nonchalance about CS. Any advice on how to combat this from an organizational culture standpoint? I mean, this is top down is part of this, right? Swim lanes,
pyramid of clarity.
Yeah, pyramid of clarity. Rules of engagement. However you want to. Yeah. I don't know what else to add. This is something that it really should come. If this is your situation, this is something that really should be coming from the C-suite, saying this is how we're going to work together.
If there's redundancy, why don't you reduce headcount?
Ooh.
Just saying.
Oh yeah, that's good. Play well. Play well. It's proud. All right. At least Kristi said it.
Everyone will start finding out how very unique their roles are.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see here. Samantha asked, we're going to try and get through as many of these. Very interesting to see sales comp tied to CS onboardings. Can you elaborate on this initiative, Kristi?
I'll give like a 2-second response here. So one of the things that we do is we actually have offered we do a survey at the end of onboarding that goes to the customer, and it asks them to confirm, right? If they are independently, what do I say? It's like, are you independently set up to succeed using our software and have realized some initial value, right? It's very specific in the wording to say, one, have you realized an initial win, or at least some indicator that says you're on track to get there? And do you feel like you and your team are set up to independently use the product? Because at the end of the day, we are a SaaS company. I'm not a services organization. They need to be empowered to do what they need to do. If that answer is anything other than a yes, then we go back to the onboarding. If it is a yes, then we have that conversation, close it out with the executive stakeholder. And then that is the line in the sand that we would say sales is now able to receive the rest of their compensation. So we don't tell the customer when onboarding is done. They tell us when onboarding is done, because who are we to say to them that you are out of this stage of the journey? If they're not set up, if they don't understand their value realization path, shame on you if you think as an organization that you're the one to tell them.
Love it. So does Samantha. All right, one last question, Nick. You wanted to jump in on this. We always talk about new customers, but what about a customer that's been around for 20 years, even before we had a customer success team? What are your suggestions on handing an already existing customer off from sales to the new CS team? So, Nick, you got 20 seconds.
Customers are going to love working with the customer success team. They're going to love building a relationship with someone who's focused on delivering outcomes for them. I would have a handoff call. Their customers are going to love it, and they're going to engage really well with the CS team.
Mandy, Kristi, anything to add? Sorry, go ahead, Mandy.
Go ahead.
No, I'm good.
I was just going to say, to Nick's point with the call, it's your opportunity to find out how you can even extract more out of a partnership. Yes, someone's been with you for 20 years, but you should always be focused on bringing them to the next level with growth and development, right? So just use it as an opportunity to take a step back, reset, and I don't want to say start over, but it's your opportunity to really shine, right? Find out what they want to accomplish from this partnership.
Yeah, I've never had a customer push back. And I work with a lot of companies. We've never had a customer push back on this notion of, hey, we've got this person dedicated to help you get more value out of what we have to offer. Right? It just doesn't happen. And if there is any pushback, it's usually because they just don't understand. So we haven't done a good enough job really explaining the role. But with that, we've come to the end of our time together today, and I wanted to say how awesome our conversation has been. But hey, what matters most is not what I think; it's what all of you think. So I kindly ask you to share your valuable feedback on LinkedIn, tagging me, our guests, or Success Coaching. A big thank you to all of our amazing panelists for generously sharing their ideas, thoughts, insights, best practices, and time, both today as well as our prep call on Monday. Let me leave you with this thought. Exceptional customer success managers understand that they don't have all the answers, but they sure know where to find them. That's why we created the CSM Mastermind to tap into the collective knowledge and experiences of our community to support everybody's growth. Remember to sign up and mark your calendars for our next event on December 13th, when we'll talk about how to say no. Until then, remember to carve out time for yourself and prioritize your mindset every day. Wishing you a fantastic rest of the day, an amazing week, a wonderful Thanksgiving next week for those of you who celebrate. I'm kind of surprised it crept up. It's early this year, kind of crept up on me, and a phenomenal month ahead. We'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.